The root of the word believer is submission, Islam, which became the name of Muhammad's religion. Following the Hijrah, Yathrib became known as Medina, the Arabic word for city, as in the city of the Prophet. The Hijrah marked the start of a new chapter in the history of humanity, as the political reign of Islam had begun. The Ummah. Muhammad founded the Ummah, the Islamic community, with God as the sovereign and Muhammad as the political authority. Religion and the power of the state were combined as one. Muhammad was the spiritual leader, chief judge, and lawgiver of the Ummah. It was not Muhammad's military position that led men to accept him as leader, but his prophethood and religious status. The political and legal authority was accepted only because of its religious basis. This would become the basis for Islamic government and loyalties of Muslims for centuries to come. The conflict with the Jews. Relations steadily broke down between Muhammad and the Jewish tribes of Medina. The Jews could not accept that Muhammad, a Meccan merchant, was their Messiah or prophet of God. For the Jews, if a prophet arising among Gentiles was genuine, then their basic ideology of Jews being God's chosen people was false. For Muhammad, if the Jews did not accept his prophethood and still maintain power and prominence in Medina, then he could not genuinely be God's prophet and messenger. The Battle of Badr. In March 624, Muhammad learned that a Meccan trade caravan was passing near Medina and ordered 315 men to prepare an attack against its 900 armed Meccans. The two small armies engaged at Wad Badr, a dry riverbed 20 miles south of Medina. The outnumbered Muslims fought bravely as their belief in God and paradise inspired confidence. Muhammad's forces defeated the Meccans at Badr and returned to Medina loaded with booty and prisoners. 4/5 of the booty went to the raiders, with the remaining 1/5 going to Muhammad for the good of the community. The Battle of Badr was not a mere military affair. It had profound religious significance for the Muslims. After years of hardship, they had been victorious over their original, more powerful foe. The success of Badr was thought of as God's deliverance for Muslims, not dissimilar to the Israelites' salvation from destruction at the hands of Pharaoh and the parting of the Red Sea. The Quran describes the event in religious terms. You did not kill them, but God killed them. You did not shoot and strike when you shot, but God shot, to let the believers experience good from himself. The first expulsion of Jews. Days later, Muhammad decided to rid Medina of Jews who had ridiculed his claim to prophethood. A large party of Muslims besieged them for 15 days in their strongholds. The Kainuka clan finally surrendered. They agreed to leave Medina with their families, but leave behind their arms and goldsmiths' tools. The Battle of Uhud. In order to maintain regional commercial operations, the Meccans had to show they were stronger than Medina and capable of removing any threat to trade. In March 625, 3,000 Meccans marched against Medina, confronting the Muslims at Uhud, a hill near Medina. In the battle, the Meccans killed 75 Muslims, while losing only 27 of their men. The Muslims, in fact, prevailed as the Meccan goal to remove Muhammad had failed. However, while the Muslims were not defeated militarily at the Battle of Uhud, the higher loss of men was considered a spiritual failure, since military and religious issues were inseparable. Why had they lost? Had they lost Allah's favor? As Badr was a sign of God's vindication, did Uhud signify loss of favor? Muhammad realized that Muslims had become too interested in the booty of war and forgotten their duty to God. Thus, God allowed the Muslim setback at Uhud as punishment for abandoning him and as a test. Such were the religious issues created by the Battle of Uhud: soul-searching, accepting some blame, and a return to traditional values in the face of Islamic defeat would become an enduring theme throughout the ages. The second expulsion of Jews. In August 625, Muhammad demanded a contribution of blood money from the Jewish tribe of Anadir. The Jews refused, so he gave them an ultimatum: leave Medina within 10 days or be killed. They would retain ownership of their palm trees and receive part of the produce. The Jews again refused, and a 15-day siege resulted. An-Nadir lost heart when the Muslims began destroying their palm trees. They agreed to Muhammad's original demand, but now he imposed less favorable terms. They were to leave their weapons behind and have nothing from the palms. An-Nadir agreed and departed in a caravan of 60 camels for the settlement of Khaybar, 70 miles to the north. Houses and palm trees belonging to the Jews were allotted to the Muslims. The Siege of Medina. On March 31st, 627, the pagan Meccans began a massive effort to defeat Muhammad and break his power in Medina. The Meccans gathered a vast confederacy, including nomadic tribes hired to participate and numbering 10,000 men and 600 horses. Muhammad's men numbered only 3,000. The last remaining Jewish tribe in Medina, Qurayza, tried to remain neutral. With the enemy more numerous and possessing vastly superior cavalry, Muhammad adopted a new form of defense unknown in Arabia, the digging of trenches. The siege of Medina is known as the Expedition of the Khandak, or Trench. The Meccans tried to persuade the Jews of Qurayza to attack the Muslims from the south, but nothing came of it. The Muslims successfully repelled all assaults for 2 weeks. Suddenly, rain swept the battlefield, and the huge confederacy ended in disarray and withdrew. The execution of the Jews of Qurayza. Muhammad concluded that the Jews of Qurayza had been guilty of treasonable acts against the Ummah because they had been in contact with the Meccans. A 25-day siege began. Eventually, the Qurayza asked Muhammad to be allowed to surrender on the same terms as An-Nadir. Instead, Muhammad appointed a judge, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, to decide the fate of the Jews. The judge decided, "I condemn the men to death, their property to be divided by the victors, their women and children to be slaves." The sentence was carried out on the following day, as the Muslims slaughtered 900 men. The women and children were sold into slavery, and the Jews' land and possessions were divided amongst the Muslims. The Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah. In 628, Muhammad and 1,400 Muslims traveled toward Mecca, making camp at nearby Al-Hudaybiyah. Hostilities were avoided when Muhammad and the Meccans agreed on a treaty called the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, in which the two sides agreed to suspend hostilities against one another for 10 years. The Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah was favorable to Muhammad's long-term strategy to incorporate Mecca into Islam at some future date. In the meantime, Mecca would regard Muhammad as disposed to friendliness and non-aggression. The Siege of Khaybar. 6 weeks later, Muhammad led the Muslims on a raid of Khaybar, the rich Jewish oasis to the northeast. After fierce fighting, 93 people were killed, and the Jews negotiated a surrender with Muhammad. In the surrender agreement, a new principle was introduced. The Jews would continue to cultivate the land, but would give up half of their harvest as payment of tribute to the Muslims. Also, Muhammad reserved the right to break the agreement and expel them if he chose. All the Jewish and Christian tribes in Arabia submitted to the Muslims under similar terms. The Jews and Christians, the dhimmi, were to pay a tribute tax known as jizya. The Pact of Khaybar agreement fixed the relationship between Muslim victors and vanquished Christian and Jewish populations when Islamic conquerors expanded beyond Arabia. The conquest of Mecca. The Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah did not last long. With his power now increased over a wide area and Mecca neutralized by the treaty, Muhammad was soon in a position to move against Mecca. In January 630, the Prophet and 10,000 Muslim warriors advanced on Mecca. The Muslim forces divided into 4 columns and stormed the city from 4 directions. The Quraysh offered little resistance and Mecca was easily conquered. Muhammad ordered all the idols at the Kaaba destroyed, rededicated it as a holy Muslim shrine, and proclaimed Mecca as the holy city of Islam. Non-believers were forbidden entry to Mecca upon penalty of death. By 631, with the Quran and sword in hand, Muslim warriors had subjugated all the nomadic desert tribes of Arabia, and the Arabian Peninsula was ruled by Muhammad and Islam. Idolatry had been eliminated from the Arabian Peninsula, and the dhimmi, Jews and Christians, were paying tribute to the Muslims. The Islamic conquests, jihad, and dominance over non-believers. The death of the Prophet. In the year 632, at the age of 59, Muhammad's health deteriorated and he died. Muslims across Arabia were shocked at the Prophet's passing. Without his presence, it was feared the Ummah would fall apart and Islam would disappear. Who could rule in the place of the great Muhammad? This question elicited both a political and spiritual crisis that would plague Islam for centuries to come. Muhammad left no successor, nor even a system for choosing one upon his death. No individual in the Ummah had Muhammad's stature, and of course no one claimed prophethood. After much argument, Muslim tribal leaders chose Abu Bakr as their leader, appointing him to the office of Caliph, or deputy of the Muslims. Abu Bakr tried to placate the believers, pronouncing that though Muhammad was gone, his holy messages would endure, and Allah's rule still existed, and that Islam was greater than the life of any man. However, with Muhammad gone, many desert tribes sought to sever their ties with Mecca. The breakaway movement became known as the apostasy, Ridda. Abu Bakr ordered the fabled warrior Khalid ibn al-Walid to quash the revolt. After unifying the peninsula, Khalid marched his Bedouin warriors beyond Arabia, into Syria and Persia, setting the stage for the Islamic conquests that would soon follow. Islam explodes out of Arabia. In 634, Abu Bakr named Umar ibn al-Khattab as his successor shortly before he died. Umar referred to himself as Commander of the Faithful, used by many future leaders. A period of bold expansion and conquest began as most of Byzantine and Persia, vast territories stretching from the Middle East to northern Africa, fell under Muslim rule. Each success reinforced their divine mission and that Allah was on their side. As Umar carried the jihad far beyond Arabia, Jews and Christians could buy the right to life and freedom of worship if they agreed to pay tribute and accept Islamic rule. Khalid ibn al-Walid's statement in Damascus in 635 became standard terms of surrender for Jews and Christians. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful, He promises to give them security for their lives, property, and churches. We give to them the pact of Allah and the protection of His Prophet, the Caliphs and the believers. So long as they pay the tax, nothing but good shall befall them. Islam conquers North Africa, Spain, India, and China. The Islamic conquests spread over land and sea. Guided by spirited and fearless leaders, the Muslims overcame the remaining Persian armies, seizing Babylonia, Mesopotamia, Armenia, and Persia. In the west, they conquered the Christian provinces of the eastern Mediterranean, from Syria and Palestine to Egypt, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. In 711, Muslims crossed the Strait of Gibraltar, advancing into the Iberian Peninsula to establish a foothold in Europe. A few years later, they controlled all of Spain and Portugal. The Muslims then headed for Europe's heartland. They were halted in the Pyrenees by Frankish leader Charles Martel at Narbonne in 720, and in 732 at the Battle of Tours at Poitiers. By 751, Islam had expanded all the way to the Indus River Valley in India and central China. A little over 1 century after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, Muslim rule covered more of the earth than did the Roman Empire at its peak. The dhimmi, the tributary.